Under the shroud of mounting grief and unanswered questions, Liam Spencer sat across from Justin Barber in the sleek mahogany-paneled office that overlooked Los Angeles's pulsating heart. The cold midday light glinted off Justin's polished cufflinks as he leaned forward, voice measured but fierce. "You have grounds for a lawsuit against the hospital and Dr. Grace." Once the champion of his recovery, Grace had become the architect of his nightmares, her unauthorized brain stimulator implant rewriting his emotions and twisting his love for hope into obsessive paranoia. At Justin's counsel, Liam agreed to file suit for intentional infliction of emotional distress, seeking not only monetary damages to atone for the mental anguish he had endured, but also a reckoning for every violation of trust, every furtive surgery, every cover-up in Grace's repertoire of atrocities. Word of the lawsuit exploded across social media platforms and news outlets, turning a family's private tragedy into a public spectacle. Headlines blared about the bold and the brainwashed, Dr. Gone Rogue, and Spencer's scandal at Forrester Hospital, while viral clips of Liam's broken testimony, voice trembling as he described waking in a panic, heart hammering at the sight of Hope's face, drew sympathy and outrage in equal measure. As the lawsuit progressed, former patients who had once believed themselves cured by Grace came forward one after another, emboldened by Liam's courage. A former senator, his medical records now unredacted by court order, revealed that he had been billed for a splenectomy he never received, but had awakened bewildered and weak, left questioning whether his body had been violated for reasons known only to the surgeon. A Bay Area tech mogul, once a VIP client whose family paid handsomely for experimental interventions, testified to postoperative nightmares so vivid they bordered on psychosis, events they had suppressed until now for fear of professional ruin. News crews camped outside the hospital gates as dozens of affidavits poured in, each one a testament to Grace's clandestine operations. Brain biopsies mislabeled as sinus surgeries, patients wired with microstimulators under the guise of pain management, and entire medical charts forged to conceal the true nature of her experiments. The courtroom became a gladiatorial arena where medical ethics and corporate profit clashed under the unforgiving scrutiny of television cameras and jurors summoned from the streets. Inside the packed chambers, Liam took the stand, hair unkempt, eyes ringed by sleepless nights, and recounted the terror of his postoperative descent into suspicion and rage. He spoke of waking up convinced Hope was in danger, of stripping the 4 tubes from his arm to break free, of the night he barricaded the hospital room door to keep Steffi, and by extension, anyone who might steal Hope away from entering. He described how every memory of tenderness had been amplified into a furnace of obsession, how every whispered mention of Grace's miracle healing had felt like the cutting edge of betrayal. Against this backdrop, Justin Barber's cross-examination of the hospital administration and Grace herself was relentless. He unspooled forged consent forms, exposed email chains discussing covert surgeries, and forced Grace to admit under oath that she had never received full institutional approval for the neuroenhancement device she implanted. The moment the judge banged her gavel to sustain an objection by Grace's defense team, the gallery erupted into murmurs of astonishment. Never before had a case so raw, so intimate, been laid bare in a courtroom. Meanwhile, outside, social media influencers live-streamed the trial proceedings, dissecting every shred of evidence from Grace's manipulated billing codes to her own shaky apology for overzealous care. Hashtags like #GraceGoneRogue and #SpencerJustice trended worldwide, drawing commentary from medical ethicists, patient rights advocates, and even Hollywood celebrities who weighed in on the morality of experimental medicine without oversight. A viral thread from a Stanford neurosurgeon analyzed the plausibility of Grace's claims, declaring the device centuries ahead of proven technology and branding it a reckless gamble on the human mind. Under the relentless glare of public scrutiny, the hospital board hastily suspended Grace's privileges, but the damage was irreversible. Reputations lay in tatters, donors threatened to withdraw funding, and the specter of class action suits from the growing roster of affected patients loomed large. As the trial entered its final act, Liam's attorney presented a comprehensive report from Dr. Bridget Forrester, the forensic pathologist who had painstakingly catalogued dozens of phantom surgeries, forged charts, and financial records showing millions funneled from VIP patients into shell corporations tied to Grace. The courtroom screen flickered with images of crumpled operative notes, ultrasound scans stripped of identifying information, yet marked with a surgeon's signature that matched Grace's handwriting. Each revelation drove the jury deeper into contemplation of the betrayal not only of one patient, but of the sacred oath that binds doctor to healer. When closing arguments began, Justin Barber's voice rang out, "This is more than a malpractice suit. It is a demand for justice for every person whose body was treated as a laboratory specimen, every soul left fractured by a betrayal of trust. We ask not only for compensation, but for accountability that reverberates through every hospital corridor in this country." Across the aisle, Grace's defense attorney pleaded for mercy, painting her as a visionary misunderstood, her methods ahead of their time, her intentions pure. But the damage had been done. The faces of broken patients and the raw testimony of their loved ones had seared the truth into the jury's conscience. When the jury filed back into the packed courtroom, hope and dread wove through the audience like a living thing. Liam, seated beside Hope, who clutched his hand, tears of relief mingling with grief, held his breath as the foreperson stood. "We find in favor of the plaintiff," the foreperson announced, voice steady yet resonant, "and award damages in the amount of $50 million, plus punitive damages to deter such conduct in the future." In that instant, a collective exhalation swept the room, sobs of vindication, gasps of sympathy for Grace's patients, and the triumphant flicker of justice served. Cameras flashed as Liam embraced Hope, gratitude and love raw on their faces, while Justin Barber nodded once, sharply, before turning to file the final motions that would ensure the judgment was enforced. In the aftermath, the hospital erected new oversight committees, medical boards re-examined protocols for experimental devices, and Grace, stripped of her license, faced criminal charges that would follow her like a shadow for years to come. Liam and Hope retreated temporarily from the public eye, choosing solitude over spectacle as they rebuilt their lives, wiser for the ordeal and more resolute in their commitment to truth. The bold and the beautiful had become more than a family saga. It was a cautionary tale of ambition unbridled, of a healer's betrayal, and of a patient's fight to reclaim not only his peace of mind, but the fundamental dignity stolen from him. In the quiet moments when Liam and Hope revisited the courtroom transcripts or read the testimony of those who had come forward, they found both sorrow and solace, sorrow for the pain inflicted, but solace in the power of the human spirit to confront wrongdoing, to demand accountability, and to emerge, against all odds, triumphant. Their journey had been marked by darkness and deception, but in the end, it illuminated a timeless truth. That justice, once awakened, knows no bounds, and no surgeon's scalpel can sever the bond between love and integrity. The moment the knock came at Grace's hidden safe house, 3 sharp raps echoing like a judge's gavel, her breath caught in her throat, and every instinct screamed that the walls were closing in. She had known this day would come the instant Liam's lawsuit and the subsequent criminal investigation unearthed her illicit operations, but she refused to go quietly. Slipping into a tailored black trench coat and fastening the last button with trembling fingers, she had rehearsed every contingency. The back exit through the alley lined with dumpsters, the stolen car parked 2 blocks away with the engine idling, the burner phone ready to call her contact in the supply chain of experimental drugs. Yet as she crept toward the side door, A sudden clang of footsteps on the fire escape froze her in place, and the voice behind her. Bill Spencer's low, unyielding drawl cut through the night air like a steel blade. "Going somewhere, Doctor?" His silhouette filled the doorway, broad-shouldered and unrelenting, his eyes burning with betrayal and something darker, satisfied triumph. For a heartbeat, Grace's mind raced through every lie she had told him, every falsified chart that bore his name of convenience, when she'd needed to funnel money through shell corporations. Bill, who had once forged an alliance with her to protect the Spencers, now stood as the roadblock between her and freedom. "I don't want this, Bill," she whispered, every nerve screaming to run, but his hand on her arm was iron. "You know what they'll do to me if I'm caught." "They'll do what any justice system does. They'll hold you accountable," he replied, voice cool. "But I'm not letting you vanish into the night." He escorted her back through the cramped hallway into the glow of the front room where two uniformed police officers waited, their badges gleaming. Grace's heart hammered as handcuffs clicked around her wrists. In that instant, her world tilted on its axis. The brilliant surgeon, the pioneer of neuropsychiatric recovery, was now a fugitive in shackles. The ride to headquarters was a blur of strobing streetlights and the dull throb of her panic. In the interrogation room, she sat across from Detective Ruiz, whose steely gaze bore into her with the patience of a surgeon and the persistence of a debt collector. He slid a thick folder across the metal table. "We have a warrant for your arrest on multiple counts: illegal medical practice, reckless endangerment, fraud, conspiracy. But we also have evidence of a larger network. The suppliers of your experimental drugs, the labs that manufactured unapproved stimulators, the financiers who funded your research off the books. You can help us unravel the entire operation, or you can take your chances in court." Grace's mind flickered between defiance and calculation. Every escape route she had planned lay behind her. Ahead stretched a cage of cold steel bars. Cooperate, and she might shave years off a potential life sentence. Her medical license long revoked, her reputation in ruins, but her freedom not extinguished. Refuse, and the network she had built would crumble around her anyway, leaving her to bear the full weight of every victim's pain. "Tell me what you want," she said, voice steady despite the tremor in her fingertips. Thus began her reluctant transformation from feared neurosurgeon to government informant. In the sterile confines of the holding cell, she dismantled her own empire piece by piece, recounting how she had recruited surgeons across state lines to implant her prototype stimulators into cardiac patients, how she had convinced pharmaceutical chemists to tweak amphetamines into untraceable compounds, how she had laundered millions through offshore accounts. Each revelation was a blade that cut deeper into her pride, yet each detail won her small concessions. Daytime freedom within the jail, private meetings with her lawyer, promises of leniency. Outside, Detective Ruiz and a task force moved like clockwork, executing search warrants on clandestine laboratories in Silicon Valley, intercepting shipments of experimental drug vials headed for Miami, and arresting chemists and delivery drivers complicit in her schemes. News of the takedown splashed across every major outlet. Former surgeon's secret lab network exposed, Grace's phantom pharmacies busted, doctor-turned-informant strike steel. The public response was a frantic swirl of condemnation and morbid fascination. True believers in Grace's vision rallied online, calling her a martyr of medical progress, while most demanded the harshest punishment for someone who had toyed with human lives. Inside the jail, Grace found herself teetering on a precipice between self-preservation and self-loathing. Nights were the worst. The clang of cell doors, the distant echoes of sobbing inmates, the relentless churn of guilt that refused to be anesthetized. She scribbled in a battered notebook, her only solace amidst the drab gray walls, outlining plans for redemption, meditations on her own hubris, sketches of coded diagrams she could no longer implement ethically. In those solitary hours, she recognized the contours of her own descent into obsession. The thrill of power when she watched brainwaves on a monitor, the intoxicating belief that she could fix anyone's mind better than nature or God. Now, stripped of her title and her freedom, she saw that in chasing control, she had unwound the very fabric of trust that holds healing together. Her cellmate, a former biotech executive convicted of insider trading, offered unexpected counsel. "You did this to yourself," he said one morning, voice rough from disuse. "But you can survive it. Use what you know to make good, to protect people from others like you." The words stung, yet sparked something in Grace, a brittle hope that she could still carve a legacy, not as the cold architect of emotional subjugation, but as a whistleblower whose testimony might shield future patients from predatory experimentation. So she leaned into the role, meeting nightly with the task force, mapping out the supply routes, naming names of shadowy financiers, drawing diagrams of the devices she had perfected and those she had incomplete notes on. Each session chipped away at her sentence. Months became years. Years became a single-digit count. Rumors circulated that she would walk free under house arrest once her cooperation was fully realized, a thought that filled her with a curious mixture of relief and dread. As the months wore on, Detective Ruiz watched her transformation with cautious respect, noting how she no longer offered excuses or half-truths, but instead accepted responsibility with a surgeon's precision. She wrote a letter of apology to each patient she had harmed, an act of contrition that the judge later cited as a factor in her sentencing. In the final hearing, the gallery overflowed with victims and their families, some offering forgiveness, others scowling in bitter defiance. The prosecution spoke of her crimes with unflinching clarity. The defense highlighted her cooperation and the lives saved by dismantling the underground network she once led. When the sentence was handed down, 5 years with eligibility for parole in 3, contingent on continued cooperation, Grace closed her eyes, a single tear tracing a path down her cheek. She had lost everything she valued, her medical career, her social standing, her unblemished self-image. Yet in the ashes of her downfall glimmered the faint outline of a new identity, one forged not in the operating room, but in the crucible of accountability. Released to house arrest under ankle monitor surveillance, Grace returned to a world that viewed her with equal parts fascination and revulsion. Reporters trailed her steps, patients whispered at her passing, and even former allies hesitated before offering help. She moved into a modest apartment overlooking the city's skyline, its lights a constant reminder of the lives she had altered, some forever broken, some irrevocably saved by the evidence she provided. There, in the hush of her confinement, she began writing again, a memoir, case studies, reflections on the ethical chasm between innovation and obsession. She reached out to medical students, giving lectures, via secure video link. On the perils of unregulated experimentation, her talks laced with the authority of someone who had seen the darkness on both sides of the scalpel. In a world that once cheered her brilliance, she now wielded her knowledge as a cautionary tale, an anti-hero who had pushed too far and paid the price. Behind every public appearance lay the scars of her ordeal, the sleepless nights, the memories of patients' tears, the echo of handcuffs snapping shut. Yet in those same moments she discovered a strange liberation, the freedom to rebuild her ethics from the ground up, to seek redemption not in accolades, but in the quiet act of bearing witness to her own failures so that others might not repeat them. Grace Spencer, once the surgeon who bent minds to her will, had become the woman who bent every truth she knew to the pursuit of atonement. And though her future remained uncertain, one thing was clear. In the dark corridors of power and ambition, her story would stand as a testament to the cost of playing God and the fierce resilience of a conscience awakened too late but never extinguished.